Welcome to the Thyroidless Life podcast with me, Dr. Rebecca Warren. This podcast is for you if you've been diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, think you might have a thyroid disorder, or are healing after thyroidectomy. I'm doing this podcast because of my own personal health journey of being diagnosed with thyroid cancer, getting my thyroid cut out, getting high-dose radiation, and being left with no answers when my health started to deteriorate quickly. It wasn't until I drew a line in the sand that my health transformed, and now I've dedicated my life to sharing this information so others don't have to go down that same path. My hope is that you never feel alone on your health journey and that you understand how incredible your body is, that it's not working against you, it's working with you, and it wants to be well. So we've talked about fasting and what it looks like, kind of how to start moving in that right direction. But because of some consults that I've had this past week, I want to talk about when you shouldn't fast. And I want to focus on that because I want to make sure that as women, we are optimizing the tools that we're using for healing to help us move forward, not to be detrimental to our health. And I had something happen this past week that I'm like, wait a minute, we got to make sure that you understand what's going on with your health, what's going on with your body, and understand when the right tools are and when to use them. And then when not to use them. Because in a world where, you're hearing all about fasting and keto and working out and being active, you have to take into consideration who you are, where your body is, and what kind of support you need. Because I can go ahead and tell you this, across the board, most of the women that I work with actually have to do less at the beginning to support and heal their hormones. So like backing off from working out, back off with like the to-do list, like stop with the fasting, stop with the low carb, which is kind of like very, very different than what you hear out there. And I'm okay with that because my goal as a functional practitioner that focuses on women and women's hormones is to look at your body as a whole and set you up for success so that your body can heal, because that's what it's created to do. And I have more women in such a sympathetic survival state, especially when it comes to hormones, that most of you guys are honestly not even seeing the results you could be seeing by the things that you're pushing yourself to do. And one of my biggest things that I am even doing with myself in my own life, and Dr. Nathan and I have talked about this, and he's kind of doing it himself too with the men and kids that he's coaching, but mostly like the men, is that, Dr. Nathan and I have spent over 10 plus years going deep in protocols and research and how to detox and how to do this and this and this and this. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had to take a step back and realize, we live in such a toxic, stressful world that we got to go back to the basics. Like, we have to realize, and this is hard for us because we like to do. If you saw our supplement cabinet, if you saw the biohacks we've invested in our home, we like to do. I love to do. I want to do. I want to if I'm going to detox, I'm going to detox hard, which is completely wrong. But, we have to go back to the fact that always the foundation thing I always want you to understand is that your body's created to heal. Okay? Your body's created to heal. No one heals you. No one fixes you. Your body heals itself. Okay? If you get on thyroid meds, that ain't fixing anything. You're just getting hormones. Your body wants to heal. You're not converting and activating thyroid hormones. You have thyroid antibodies. You had to get your thyroid cut out. Those were all symptoms of your body telling you that something was wrong and it wasn't addressed. Right? It's an adaptive mechanism. It's a survival mechanism, okay? But your body wants to heal itself. And so before you go out there and do these parasite cleanses and, detox and do all this stuff, we got to go back to the basics that are powerful, that support how your body's created to heal and function, that we're lacking in this modern world. I've always loved Dr. Nathan loves saying ancestral tools in a modern world, like going back to an ancestral way of living in this modern world. Because I'm not telling you that going outside barefoot is going to heal everything. But what I am telling you is that you were created to have this. You were created to need this. You were created to your cells, the atoms, these electrons, they are meant to interact in such a way with our environment that it helps reset, rebalance, keep us in check, and we're lacking that, right? So things become dysfunctional and things become dysregulated because you're lacking a necessity. I mean, it's more obvious if, if I say, stop drinking water for a month, you'd be like, that's crazy. Like, my body needs that. Well, your body needs sunshine. Your body needs lymphatic work, like to be moving in a functional way that you're pumping your lymphatic system. Your body needs to go outside and interact barefoot. You need those, you need that, right? And so when we're missing that, your body needs clean, nutritious, nourishing food that's not overly processed. We weren't meant to live our lives just off of all of the synthetic stuff, right? And so when you start implementing these things, your body heals. And that's why I hate the saying food is medicine. And I get it though, because like there's all these healing properties and things and all these nutrients. But if food was the medicine, then we wouldn't see all this healing and fasting. The food has energy, it has information, so that your body can take it and utilize it and do what with it? Heal and function well. The healing is in you. The day you were created in the womb, you were fearfully and wonderfully made, and you have that in there. So when we have kind of deviated from that, things become dysfunctional. And when we align with the way God created us to heal and function, eating, moving, drinking, then our body can be more optimal. I don't think it's a smart idea to go out there and buy a Parasite cleanse. Oh, women online hate when I say that. I hate it. There's a company that's gotten really, really popular out there. You can go out there and take some supplements to help with some clearance and then do a Parasite. Don't freaking do that unless you know that you're drinking enough water, that you're having adequate bowel movements, that you know the environment, that you've worked on the environment in your gut. Because parasites can be protective. Parasites can hold twice of its weight in toxins, okay? And so a lot of you guys are like, I've got parasites, and you're going and killing off all these parasites when they're there in an environment to protect you. You've got to know, like, is your lymphatic system good? Is it moving? Is it constantly moving? Is your liver optimal? Are your hormones optimal? You've got to be able to eliminate, you got to be able to keep things in check before you start going to kill stuff, especially stuff that might be there to protect you. So in the end, we got to go back down to the basics. You've got to look at your body as this healing mechanism. And how do I support the healing mechanism? And a lot of you guys need to hear this, okay? Listen, there's just as much healing in, if not more, in the not doing than in the doing, okay? I had to tell someone this past week, you need to chill out on your workouts. Those 5 days a week, your cortisol, you don't have cortisol, it's dysregulated. That's why you're crashing and burning. You need to slow it down. And she's like, oh no. I'm like, no, you can still be active. Walk miles, do yoga. And that's hard to like hear sometimes. Stop fasting, stop doing these things. But you have to understand, especially as women, that we check things off. Check, right? Like we got all this to-do list. We got stuff to do for work. We stuff to do for the family. And a lot of you guys think just because you're doing it and you can do it, you think you should be doing. And that's not the case, all right? You have to make sure that you're in a place that when you add these good stressors in, that your body can respond the right way, right? Like exercise and fasting and cold water plunging. Like these are all stress to the body, right? I know cold water plunging, it's so big right now. These are stressors to the body. And let me go ahead and tell you guys this. With the cold water plunging, the purpose of this cold water plunging is to, in a way, essentially to train your body to go into parasympathetic and stay into parasympathetic. Y'all are cold plunging, then going about your day in a lifestyle that is eliciting constant sympathetic mode, okay? you're in survival mode, your hormones are all wacky, your T3 is suboptimal. And so you're plunging and plunging and plunging, trying to work on this parasympathetic, when maybe you should take a step back and look at what's going on throughout the day. Because you can create some very big parasympathetic response by breath work, by 10, 15 minutes of quiet time, meditation, prayer, by going outside and doing that consistently. And so a lot of you guys are stressing your body out and not even training your body in the right way when you're doing these cold plunges, all this shaking and moving in the water. That's not how you train your body in the parasympathetic. You're supposed to be calm. You're not supposed to move. And your body should be in a good, place to handle that. Now, some of you guys are like, well, Dr. Rebecca, I'm not optimal with my thyroids, but I've seen great results with the cold water therapy. Okay, great. But I'm telling you, there's a better way to do it if your body is in a survival mode. And just so you guys know, I've been talking about contrast showers and cold water therapy for years. My thyroid community heard about it years ago. I love it. But again, we're going back to the basics. Like, what can you do to best support your body in hormone healing, which is so important for women. Our hormones are so sensitive to internal and external things that are going on. And that's great. That's amazing. You want that ebb and flow of thyroid hormones and or sex hormones and cortisol to help us and respond in different ways. But again, let's go back to the basics, okay? What that means is, what can we give our body? What can we do to support our body and most especially our hormones, so that we're in a good place, that when we add these good stressors in, we respond right. When fasting, I've loved fasting. I've been doing it. I always have to calculate because, man, time is just flown by. Pre and post kids. So this was pre-kids, 2009, right? So 2019, that's 15 years now. And so I've done it on and off for 15 years. So I think, I know it has. I've taught it. But let's talk about, I'm going to talk about when not to fast and when to look at the other things as well, and like when to prioritize more of the slowing down to support your thyroid hormones, okay? So first of all, when not to fast. I think it'll be really important for you guys. Like, if you haven't done, my last consult was about optimal thyroid, optimal lab testing, and I'll give you a scenario that I just saw recently. Is that this woman looked at her fasting insulin and c-peptides, and I had a little brain fart on my last one, and I did not talk about c-peptide, and my bad. We're going to talk about it right now. Okay, so the reason why I look at c-peptide is because fasting insulin, there can be some like ebb and flow, like a little bit of a higher, a little bit of a lower. It can kind of have this ebb and flow depending on when you test it, whereas c-peptide reflects insulin, but it's a stable number. And in this situation, this woman was like, I want to do keto, I want to do low carb. I heard it's fantastic, but her C-peptide was out of range, meaning there wasn't an appropriate insulin response. Okay, if things have slowed down and you having, and let me go ahead and tell you, I've used fasting the right way to help with insulin sensitivity and blood sugar issues, but again, if you have T4, T3 conversion issues and there's an insulin response issue, that's a problem, okay? That's a problem, because then we're looking at you releasing too much insulin and then crashing down to too little insulin, and it's causing a big dysregulation and keeping your glucose control, like keeping your glucose under control. And what does that have to do with like T4, T3, which is why T4, T3 conversion is important to look at, along with fasting insulin and C-peptide. With T4 to T3, T3 is going to be important in getting glucose into the cell. It's going to be really important to manage your carbs, pretty much. And so if you have this issue here where you're constantly having suboptimal T3 and an abundance of carbs, you don't have enough T3 on a daily basis at meals to help shuttle that glucose, to help utilize that glucose, to help, burn that glucose. And so you're kind of setting yourself up for long-term insulin glucose issues. And so if I see that there's an insulin that's really dysregulated, a c-peptide that's dysregulated. Another thing I want to add to, let me go ahead and tell you this. Another thing to know and be aware of, especially for those of you with thyroid autoimmunity, like Hashimoto's and thyroid globulin antibodies, what you want to be aware of is that in the presence of active autoimmunity, so it's not just having the antibodies there, but having an active autoimmune reaction and response, is that you're going to increase your chances of developing other autoimmune disorders. And we know that having that there, you can increase your chances of autoimmune disorders related to blood sugar balance. And so right now, when I was growing up, we had childhood diabetes and adult onset diabetes, right? And now it's not called that, because you can develop childhood diabetes as an adult. And what does that mean is there's an autoimmune component. So type 1 diabetes and type 1.5, because there's a type 1.5, has a major autoimmune component. And so when I see, like, okay, there's a history of autoimmune issues there with the thyroid, and I'm seeing this kind of weird dysregulated c-peptide and insulin, especially when it's crashing too low and it's remaining too low, we need to take a step back and understand that right now is not the time to be super restrictive. Right now is not the time to fast and go super low carb. Right now we need to take a step back and work on increasing that T4 to T3 conversion and see how your body responds. Increase good healthy carbs to see if your body and your insulin can respond to that and retest it, right? So you want to make sure that before you're jumping into like keto and low carb and fasting, that can your body bounce back from that? Like, with your thyroid status, can it bounce back from that, right? What does that fasting insulin and C-peptide look like? Is it ridiculously low? If it's ridiculously high, when I see higher insulin, I see that fasting can be really, really good, okay? But if I'm seeing it too low, way too low, I'm taking a step back and saying either something is wrong here with the pancreas, autoimmune related maybe, or you've been chronically too restrictive, and this is never a good thing when it comes to your hormones, okay? So that's not a place where you're going to do fasting and low carb. Now, you don't want to do fasting if you have chronically, and this is a really interesting one, because I have people every time I teach on this, especially like in my community and stuff like that, I have people that are like, but Dr. Rebecca, I feel amazing when I fast, even though I have adrenal issues. It's not an adrenal issue in and of itself. It's not like the adrenals are fatigued. It's HPA dysregulation, which is your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your adrenals, like the communication there. And I want you to understand that, yeah, you can fast in a way that like, oh no, I feel good on this, but how is that affecting things long term? Like, how is that affecting your thyroid hormones? How is that affecting your sex hormones? Because I want you to understand something. When there's a dysregulation in the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the adrenal, you've got to understand that it's your brain signaling that something is up, right? Stressor. And I always give like a simple example that this is this is a very primitive, powerful system that has kept us alive since the beginning of human existence, right? And our body is incredible, and it'll adapt to the signals of our hypothalamus. So let's say we're, hunting and gathering, and we're in the woods, and we hear something behind us, and there's a bear. Our hypothalamus, without like our brain, registers the signal of stress, that danger, without us having to tell it, right? It's like this innate intelligence that we have within our body. And in that moment, our brain's going to signal to the pituitary to the adrenals, epinephrine gets released, and then we have some cortisol going on there. Eventually, cortisol comes a little bit later, but either way, when that cortisol is released, our body's in a hierarchy of needs. And that hierarchy of needs is survival. So you can see high blood pressure, heart rate, depending on how long you have to run away from, how long you're being hunted, high cholesterol, your digestive system shuts down, your thyroid's going to shut down, your ovarian signaling, FSH, LH is all going to shut down, because what our body wants to know is like, how do I survive this situation and get away? So, sympathetic is fight or flight and sometimes freeze. Like, you might be so scared you freeze in place. But the goal is that our body is so smart, there's going to be a hierarchy of need in those situations. And then you can get away. Hopefully you can climb a tree. The bear can't climb the tree. And then you signal to the body that now you can go into parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, and heal. Okay? So everything that just happened, you can heal from, and you can go back to normalization of these systems. You can urinate, your thyroid gets back on track. And again, this has kept us alive since the beginning of time, right? So when you are in a sympathetic state, like, why is it that if there's dysregulation in the HPA axis, that some people while fasting, they feel good? And this is what I've seen, and this is years of seeing it, because fasting, can help with like healing and autophagy. But I know this, you're not going to feel as good. You're not going to see long-term healing as good as if your body was in a better state before going into it. So a lot of people are like, okay, I feel better on this. Well, you're comparing it to where you started, whereas I, as a functional practitioner, am comparing it to where you should be. Like, what kind of lasting change could you see? Like, what kind of changes should we see on blood work? What kind of changes should I see in recovery with your thyroid hormones and sex hormones? You're not going to see those same results being in a stressed out state and then jumping into fasting. You're just not. You might see some benefits because your body's amazing and it's going to be like, oh, we're fasting. Well, let's see what I can do here. Your body's incredible. But you're going to see much better results if you go into a parasympathetic healing state when you go into fasting than if you did it in survival mode. Plain and simple. I've been doing hormone testing, thyroid hormone testing on women, not just one time. I've done it on women for years. I see these ebbs and flow. I retest Dutch tests, I retest CAR tests, I retest thyroid hormones, and I see that consistently, that the women that go into it in a state of going back to the basics and foundational, getting these hormones, these nutritional deficiencies under control, when they go into fasting, like what'll happen is this. I'll tell you what'll happen is they come in, they're fasting, and I'm like, we're going to stop that. We're going to step away from that and let's work on this. And then when they go into fasting, whoa, oh my gosh, like, okay, I lost even more weight if that's their goal. And it's actually staying off over time without me having to be restrictive or beating my body up, right? Whoa, I can see a difference in how I feel. Oh, wow, I can actually not only decrease my thyroid medication, but stay on that lower dose. And so what you want to make sure when that HPA is dysregulated is, where do you want to be when you go into healing? How do you want these results to last, right? I do not push for good stressors when the HPA, the adrenal, the cortisol is dysregulated, because I want women to see the best results long-term, not just temporarily. I also believe that a lot of women, even when their HPA is dysregulated, they feel better on fasting because there's gut issues, there's inflammation, and also, I'm going to call this out because I understand it, I see it a lot, but like food can be heavy, like a heavy topic. It can be like a frustrating thing. Like thinking about what to eat, especially if you can't have certain food items, temporarily, it's a lot to just, and then if you have kids and you have a family. And so what I also find is a lot of women feel better because if they're fasting, their gut is kind of like, your gut kind of changes and you don't have bloating, you don't have these issues there. But also you don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about eating, and you slightly feel better. Then like a lot of women, like, this is great. I want to keep doing this because like I feel a little less inflamed. My gut is not bloated. But then remember, you always have to be able to come off of that fast and then eat and eat a good amount, especially of protein. You, as women, have to eventually eat good, healthy carbs. And then that's where the problem kind of comes back to the surface, where it's like, no, Dr. Becca, I can't have carbs. Like, I've had women tell me that through the years, like, I can't have carbs. Then I'm like, ma'am, there's something seriously wrong with you. You should, I'm not telling you to go out there and eat, Chick-fil-A every single day. But what I'm also trying to say is, you should be able to increase good, healthy carbs and your body responds to that. But a lot of women now believe that they can't do certain things because they feel better fasted or they feel better in like low carb. And I know I said we're talking about fasting, but I got to throw that low carb in there because you guys, that kind of goes hand in hand a lot of times when you're making these types of lifestyle changes. And so again, if you find yourself not being able to reintroduce a whole entire like macro, like carbs, that is not you should stay off of it forever. That is you have underlying issues that haven't been addressed and you're kind of like masking it by using fasting. Remember, the purpose of fasting isn't fasting alone. The purpose of fasting is to, conserve energy, step away, and we've talked about this, remove the food, go into autophagy, create stem cells. But the purpose of fasting, it's 50% fasting, it's 50% refeeding, good healthy protein, mTOR pathway, and for women especially good healthy carbs eventually. And so if that dysregulation within that HPA axis is there, you're going to have a harder time long-term bouncing back from that. I know a lot of you guys, and I've talked about this in the past, want to test your cortisol. I'll put a link in the show notes for HPA kind of like testing. Now, let me give you some disclaimers about when I think you should do it or shouldn't do it. Okay. If you are on thyroid meds and you have to be on thyroid meds and your thyroid meds aren't optimal for you, that is not the time to go do HPA axis cortisol testing. That's just not the right time. Because right off the bat, if you're dependent on meds, post-thyroidectomy, or you've been on it for years and years or decades, like that low thyroid meds, low thyroid hormones will always cause, it's a big stressor. So you're going to get it tested and you're going to see that is affected by what's happening with your thyroid hormones. So right off the bat, that is not the great time to test for that. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys this. The best way to test is cortisol through saliva over a 24-hour period. Okay? I like cortisol in urine, but that is more complex within the Dutch testing. But you want to get that tested appropriately. One time on blood work is not enough, and it's not going to give you enough information about how to kind of support the dysregulation, because you could be making too much cortisol or too little. But at the same time, you can either have too much at the tissue or too little at the tissue. Or at the same time, you might be inactivating it. Or you might not have good diurnal patterns, like patterns throughout the day. You might not have a right cortisol awakening response. So understanding your patterns allows you to modify, adrenal support according to what's going on with your body throughout the day. Okay? Now, for those of you guys that do have, thyroid, a thyroid gland, and there's something going on, if you have thyroid antibodies, if you have some thyroid conversion, I do think you can still get that tested if you're not on thyroid meds. I think putting that along with healing the thyroid, when I put those two together, like whatever's causing that thyroid dysregulation, that conversion or the autoimmunity, I usually tend to start with what's dysregulated with the HPA axis. If you have that thyroid gland, kind of support HPA axis and then jump into whatever the thyroid issue is. So that way you can actually see a response to healing, like see a response with those thyroid autoimmunity. Because remember, again, if you're depleted, your body is not focused on healing. If it's too high, your body's not focused on healing. You're focused on dealing with these stress signals. Okay, so that's kind of my disclaimer there. I think it can be a beautiful test. And then I usually, 90 or 120 days of doing protocols and then retesting. And I want you to understand this. You will not reset this HPA dysregulation just by taking supplements. I love adaptogens. I love glandulars if you need them. But it is 50-50 supplementation to go in there and help support. But it's also lifestyle related, right? Sunlight, going outside, doing all these types of things. And I've talked about it in previous episodes. We have multiple biohack sessions in my Thyroid Inner Circle community that you can check out by going to my website. I'll put a link there, drrebeccawarren.com. But going back to kind of like figuring out, okay, so should I fast, should I not fast? Number one, if there's all this kind of dysregulation where your insulin's kind of too low, I'm not fasting. We got to identify what's going on there. I'm not fasting if you're in survival mode and things are dysregulated in regards to, your HPA axis. We are not fasting if you are not eating enough. And this is kind of like a touchy subject for a lot of women that I work with. And it's very confusing because we've been fed this message for so long that calories in, calories out. And that the way to lose weight or to stay healthy or to be well is just focus on calories and eating less. And, it's funny because, not funny, it's actually tragic because that's what I was told when I was a patient. Doctors still say that. And I just did the interview with Dr. Bianco, former president of the American Thyroid Association, has done all this amazing work for T4, T3 combo therapy medication. And he admitted, he's like pretty much like, I'm ashamed, I'm embarrassed that here were all these patients that said, I don't feel well on thyroid meds. And he would tell them, well, you need to eat less in calories. So we've been fed this like toxic messaging for so long that it's become kind of at a core, whether you realize it consciously, it's there. It's the subconscious thing of eating less because if you eat more, you're going to get fat. Or if you eat more, that's not how you should do it. When that is really detrimental to our hormones. And so if you find yourself consistently eating under 1,300 calories, 1,200 calories, that's a problem. And let alone if you're active, if you're out walking miles or lifting weights or doing all these things, that is just depletion. We are depleted as women. We are getting by as shells of ourselves. And a lot of us don't even realize it because we've been in this state for so long. And the other thing I think can be really dangerous is that I believe in intuitive eating. I think that listening to your body, and especially around your menstrual cycle, or even when you're postmenopause, and if you find yourself being drawn to more carbs or more fat, to like listen to your body. But I think the dangerous thing is that we have trained our bodies to go with such little nutrients. Leptin and ghrelin are hormones. Leptin and ghrelin are associated with feeling full and hungry, and that we've affected these hormones for so long that we think we're intuitive. We think, I actually am so full, and I'm like, how is that possible? You ate like 10 grams of protein for your morning, and you had a coffee and a salad and half a chicken. Like there's no way with the amount of calories that you're consuming that's enough. But you've trained your body to do that. Again, that's going to put you in a very big sympathetic state. And if you don't know what it looks like, and if you haven't trained your body to be well nourished, what's going to happen is that you stay in a catabolic state, even when you're eating, because you also don't eat enough protein. And if you're in a chronic catabolic state, you're constantly breaking down. Autophagy and fasting, that's fantastic. But if you can't rebuild tissue, if you can't rebuild those cells and put on, lean muscle, then we're missing it completely. And a lot of women don't even realize that they're not eating enough until we do a food diary, which I feel like there can be a lot of negative connotation around it, especially if you've had some, food issues. But I always try to teach women that 9 times out of 10, my food diary isn't to eliminate, restrict, or anything. 9 times out of 10, it's a conversation of, if you love your body and you want to support your body, especially your hormones, you have to eat enough. And the snacking is a sign that you're not eating enough during your meals, and the feeling hangry and feeling tired and feeling like you need all these things, not seeing better results that you could see in your workouts, is your body needs this. And so I will immediately stop women from fasting if I do not see that they're eating enough. And you have to understand what that feels like consistently, like to eat enough at every meal. It's going to feel very, very different than what you've done for months, years, or decades, right? And once you understand what that looks like, once you understand what that feels like, and you start to feel, you'll feel a difference. Then when you go into fasting, you can go into, the catabolic state. And then when you go into, refeeding, which is eating enough protein, fat, some carbs, then you can see good refeeding. You can see a good anabolic state, which is really important for women. Your ability to put on lean muscle is so vitally important. Not only that, but not eating enough and constantly fasting and being restrictive. I'm talking to a lot of you guys that are doing one meal a day or, carnivore for too long. Like a lot of women that come to me, they're like, look at this, Dr. Rebecca, I'm doing so good on these things. Like I'm fasting so good. I'm intermittent fasting so good. I did carnivore, and I'm like, no, your nutrients are good. Like you're eating very nutritious food, but very little of it. But again, these things will absolutely, as women, affect the hypothalamus, affect the pituitary, and affect your hormones. We know that caloric restriction long term, we see it over and over again in studies, will decrease T4 to T3 conversion and will affect TSH signaling. So imbalances there. We know that when you do not have enough nutrients and calories for the body, then you will see decrease in signaling between LH, FSH, like your sex hormone signaling. You're going to down regulate because if you don't have enough nutrients to deal, like again, what are calories? Calories are energy. It's fuel to move your cells forward. It's also building blocks. It's information. It's data. It's support for your body. And you're lacking this, your body is going to just go haywire. Your sex hormones, your thyroid hormones, because your body's saying, oof, it seems like we're in a little low-grade famine. I've got to conserve energy. And remember, when we're in survival mode, there's a hierarchy of needs. So you have to be able to, look at that. You have to be able to look at your protein. You got to look on all of that. And I'm excited to go deeper into like nutrients and protein and all of that for you guys and here in these few episodes that I have coming up. But I want you to understand that chronically fasting without refeeding, if you've fasted, let's say, intermittent fasted, if you've done low carb, if you've done plant-based, for like 90, or let's say like 3 months, 3+ months, and you haven't done a period, if you've done plant-based where your protein has gone very, very, very high, or like very high. I say very high because a lot of you guys might be eating 50, 60. I'm talking about, 120 or above in regards to protein. Or you haven't had, if you've done intermittent fasting consistently, you've done water fast, and you haven't had a period of time where you've done an increase of good healthy carbs up to 100, 150 grams of carbs, it's time. It's time to do it. And if you need help with that, check out my website. I've actually have I'll be sharing more details about that in the next episode of some new options to work with me. So make sure you check out my website if you need help and support in that area. I have some new options for you guys to work with me. But you should not be constantly fasting, and you should not be fasting if you're chronically under eating, like 1,200 calories less, 1,300 calories or less, even some of you guys 1,500 calories or less, especially if you're active. And if you're not hitting at least at a bare minimum, over 100 grams of protein. Because eating enough protein is what's going to get you out of that catabolic state, like out of that breakdown state. Chill out with that. Like you would not believe how many women I've had to say no more intermittent fasting. Because this is the other thing. This is why so many people talk about fasting being bad for your thyroid hormones. Because you're in that constant catabolic state. You're breaking down. You're eating too little, and that will affect not just your T3, like your active thyroid hormone, but the production of T4. And if you're doing it that way, then all these naysayers about fasting for your hormones are right. And you're going to have some issues there. And so, again, remember, I don't want you to look at your body and say, like, something's wrong with me because I can't eat carbs. Something's wrong with me, like who I am, like how my body was made, because I can't eat good, healthy, grass-fed, organic red meat. It's not that there's something wrong with you, is that something's dysregulated that has to be addressed. So right off the bat, you gotta take a step back from that. Like you've got to take a step back from that and work on refeeding and nourishing and loving on your body. Now, let me talk about kind of, as we kind of wrap up this episode, let me talk about where to start, like what you should be focusing on for your hormones before you get into these like bigger biohacks. And I love fasting. And you know what? I haven't said this out loud, but I feel like a lot of women that are losing a lot of weight while fasting is because you're so restrictive with your calories. I'm just going to add that out there. Like, oh, I lost all this weight. Like, you're so, yeah, if you cut back on calories, like I see personal trainers helping all these women lose weight and they're eating all this food that's just crappy, like just very inflammatory foods, but they're losing weight. Well, I'm like, yeah, well, if you cut back on calories and you exercise, you can lose weight. But is that all we're doing this for, ladies? We're doing this for our hormones. We're doing this for long-term healing. And when it comes to intermittent fasting, a lot of these people that are critical of it, they're critical of it as well, rightfully so, because a lot of women and men are looking at intermittent fasting and they're doing it in a way that's caloric restrictive. And that's not what intermittent fasting is. Intermittent fasting is time restricted eating. You're eating all of your nutrients and your calories in a shorter window, but you're still nourishing yourself. Okay? You know what? The naysayers are right. If you're very restrictive within your eating window, then that's a problem. And then longer fast, water fasting, it's not just doing 3 days of water fast. The healing, lasting changes happen when you come off of it and how you refeed for the next few weeks and how you treat your body. So that one, I just wanted to add that out there. Okay, so where to go and where do you change? And I want to let you guys know, if you haven't checked out my Thyroid Inner Circle community, you are able to join it now if you guys want to join that community. That's how you work with me. And you actually have the opportunity to do one-on-ones by being a part of my community, one-on-one consults with me. But we're going to be going in next month into these different things. We're going to do deep dives on all of these different things that you've got to know. Am I doing this? Is this right? But I want to talk about, the lifestyle, the basics. I got to find a better word for it because basic seems very like, oh, basic. But no, these are powerful, right? So before going off and doing all these fasting and parasites and all of this stuff, like let's talk about a few things that you should be focusing on, working on right now, okay? Number one, we got to work on normal bowel movements every single day. I'm not talking about like, no, I do have normal bowel movements as long as I drink my coffee. If I don't drink my coffee, I don't have bowel movements. Or no, it's pretty normal bowel movements, but sometimes randomly, like around ovulation or, I sometimes might get a little constipated or I might have a little bit of loose stools. No, I go pretty much every day except that, I might miss a day. Like none of that is normal. Going to the bathroom and feeling like you're not fully emptying, that's not normal. Eating fatty meals and then having like loose stools and like having kind of like stomach ache or bloating after you eat meals, that's not normal. And this is important because then it's an underlying gut issue. Not only is the gut microbiome important, obviously, but this is how you detox. This is how you eliminate. So like you're going out fasting and losing weight and dumping these toxins from your fat cells and you don't even have a proper way to eliminate it because your bowel, like your gut microbiome is not optimal. If you've lost a gallbladder, not optimal, right? So you want to start looking at having normal bowel movements, right? The second thing I like to talk about is being well hydrated. And it's not just about drinking enough water, but having water that you remineralize, right? So a lot of our reverse osmosis water lose all the nutrients, the minerals that are essential for getting the water, for well hydrating our cells. So making sure that you're drinking enough water while also having enough minerals and electrolytes. You can do one of those, electrolytes out there, like, there's different clean electrolytes, but you can just increase your salt, do like a red mint salt. I love, there's a supplement in my supplement shop called Adrenal Cocktail, and I freaking love it. The women I put on it, they love it. They notice a difference because it's not only supportive with nutrients for your adrenals, but also increases your mineral content. So it helps with hydration. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Okay. So, and I'll put a link that in my shop for that. Next thing that I think is going to be really, really important before you start going crazy on all this fasting and all this stuff is, are you menstruating right, appropriately, right? What does it look like when your menstrual period comes, right? Is it heavy? Is it too light? Is it painful? What's going on there? Menstruating and bleeding is essential for us, especially if you're cycling for this, removal. Like it's a healing process. It's a cleansing process, and having, good menstruation and then a good ovulation is important. I think, again, I like to use fasting as a tool to optimize. So if I can go into fasting already in a healing state, I'm going to do that. So proper menstruation, right, is going to be really, really important. Next is lymphatic. I'm going to do a series of videos on this because I think it's really important for the thyroid. So that your lymphatic system is a part of your, immune system. It's kind of like a highway throughout your entire body with lymph nodes where you have white blood cells that go to, clear out damaged cells and toxins and mold and heavy metals and viruses and bacteria. And the thing is this, like it's a beautiful system that your immune system uses to, keep things in check, but it doesn't have its own pump. It doesn't pump on its own. So your movement, your muscle contraction, is important for eliminating the junk that's in our lymphatic system. And it's not just that we're sitting at computers more, we're sitting in our car more, we have bad posture, we have spine, nervous system issues, but we also have very restrictive clothing and bras that are going to cause stagnation within this lymphatic system. And this is important because you have this complex chain around your thyroid that you want to support autoimmunity and thyroid antibodies and all of these things. You need to go in there and constantly pump that every single day. And again, I'm going to make a whole series of videos on this. So also join my newsletter. I'll send the videos straight to your inbox. Just go to drrebeccawarren.com. Join my newsletter so you can get this on how I do it for hormone health and for thyroid hormone health. Really, really important stuff. Next is sunshine. I know this seems like very, very simple, but what helps regulate our cortisol and melatonin, it's not just the sun, it's not just the angle of the sun, it's not just the spectrum, because you have a different spectrum in the morning than in the evening than in the middle of the day. It's all of that put together. We have our own system that is meant to download the sun and help to, like the sun rays, like where it's at, what color it's at, to help set us up for healing sleep, to help us set up for our melatonin production, our cortisol balance throughout the day. So I can't stress this enough. You got to get outside. Not just open your windows. You've got to get outside, get that sunshine. I have a lot of information on that too in the previous episodes when we talk about adrenals. So you can go back and listen to that. Get outside. Go outside barefoot. We have studies that look at, it helps regulate our cortisol, these ionic charges within the earth, with how our ionic charges respond to that is a really good way to help decrease inflammation. And it has to be constant, right? Every single day. I mean, if I could write a prescription to all of you guys, I would write a prescription about this to all of you guys, to go outside and to go outside barefoot. It's so vitally important. So this is like a good place to start. Breathing, box breathing. Box breathing is really important. Making sure to take in deep breaths. So like a lot of you guys are cold plunging. We're like trying to like stimulate vagus nerve and parasympathetic. Deep breaths. And I have a lot of the women I work with that work from home. I give them instructions on how to do this. Step away from the computer. Go outside if you can. breathing in, holding it, breathing out, holding it. You don't realize when you're in this chronic state of going, how shallow your breathing is, and how intensive, like just kind of resetting it is to take deep breaths and to be aware of that breathing and doing that a few times. Now, I came across an article about psychological sighs, and I was like, oh my gosh, I do this, and a lot of women do this, and it's this sigh that just comes out of your body like a, like you don't even realize you're doing it. I've done it. The reason why I know I do it is because like there was one time I was at the store and I had all 3 kids, and it was a lot. And I did it, and my psychological sighs are so dang loud. I'm loud as it is, but my sighs are like, like, and this lady, that wasn't loud. I just didn't want to do it loud. I was going to do it loud, and then I was like, I don't want to like mess up your ears, like as you're listening to this. You're listening with headphones. Just trust me, my psychological sighs are loud. And this lady turned around and looked at me, and I was like, I didn't even know I was doing it. And these psychological sighs is this innate, like this, you just randomly take this deep breath in, like you're like, you know, like, and it's this innate intelligence that's trying to increase that oxygen and to reset our nervous system by taking in a deep breath where you don't even realize you're doing it. And so breathing in and of itself and just kind of slowing down and breathing and being quiet. Like, have you ever just sat there and just not done or thought anything, which I know is crazy to say to a woman, and it's crazy if you said this to me, but just sitting there and taking 10 to 15 minutes and resetting your nervous system. I mean, honestly, I feel like if you guys could do between the the sunshine, the barefoot, the meditation and prayer, and then breathing, like the box breathing, and then prioritizing your sleep. I truly believe that you could reset. I know this. You could reset your HPA dysregulation without the use of any supplements. And I love that by going back to these basics that are ancestral tools in this modern world, you can see some amazing things going on. So stop trying to jump into the deep end of biohacking and information and out there. Fasting is amazing. Going low carb can be amazing. Yes, absolutely. But can we as women agree to the fact and just come to the terms with not doing a lot is just as important, like slowing down? In the slowing down, there's so much healing. In the stopping of doing, and adding more to our plate, we can see way more. Like on loving and like supporting our gut and just eating fermented foods and working on our gut environment can get rid of parasites and not needing to go and kill off all these parasites constantly. Like, ladies, I mean, honestly, I'm telling you this, like this is like preaching to myself. I'm about to go on vacation, which is not vacation with 3 kids, right? But I have to learn how to like chill out and not worry about everything and everyone, you know, in my coaching clients and my community and all of that, like slowing down and understanding that not doing is just as healing as doing. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to leave a 5-star review. I love being able to see and read how this information is helping you on your health journey. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast. That way, when new episodes are live, you can have it automatically downloaded to wherever you listen to your podcast. The number one question I get asked is, how do I work with you? If you are interested in finding out more information about me and being a part of my community, go to my website, drrebeccawarren.com. That's dr.rebeccawarren.com. And you should be able to find the answer to your questions there, as well as checking out my Thyroid Inner Circle membership group, getting access to the free Thyroid Labs ebook that I have available for you, and so much more great information.